Taste the Mediterranean through March 19th at Whole Foods Market. Save on animal welfare certified bone and beef short ribs, sustainable wild-caught sockeye salmon, and more. Find sales on Parmigiano Reggiano, charcuterie and ground lamb. Grab an olive boule bread from the bakery. Plus, wines from the Mediterranean start at just $8.99. Taste the Mediterranean now at Whole Foods Market. Must be 21 plus. Please drink responsibly.
This podcast is made possible through donations from listeners like you and our partners at Goalie Ashwa Gummies. You can find them at goalie.com. Use promo code the Show Up Dad Foundation to get 10% off your order. Zenderance Active Wellness and Sports Nutrition. Their products are designed to maximize your health. At Zenderance, they strive to support and have a positive impact on the wellness of every hardworking dad. Use my code the Show Up Dad and get 10% off your next purchase. For more info, go to www.zenderance.com. Tall Man Equipment. Standing taller than the rest of the competition in lineman tools since 1952. Give them a follow at www.tallmanequipment.com. And last but not least, Adam Lane Smith. He is an attachment specialist who helps people to heal, connect, and build. Use my promo code SHOW, spelled SHOW, for a 50% discount on his attachment bootcamp course. Thank you. Welcome to the Show Up Dad podcast. Are you ready to embark on a journey of self-improvement, fatherhood, and creating strong relationships within your family? Well, look no further, because this podcast is here to guide you every step of the way. We are thrilled to have a very special guest joining us on this episode. Brandon, the amazing founder of TRT Community and host of All Things Testosterone, is here to share his expertise and insights on becoming a better father and husband, as well as successfully navigating the challenges of a blended family. With the world's largest support group and podcast for men and women undergoing testosterone replacement therapy, Brandon knows the ins and outs of personal growth and creating a fulfilling life. But what makes this conversation even more exciting is his personal experience in the realm of blended families. Through his own journey, he has discovered effective strategies and valuable lessons that he is eager to share with all of you. So whether you're a dad looking to improve your parenting skills, a husband striving to strengthen your relationship, or navigating the complexities of a blended family, this episode is jam-packed with wisdom and practical advice. Get ready to be inspired as Brandon opens up about his experiences and offers valuable insights that can transform your family dynamics. And hey, if you're interested in connecting with Brandon, collaborating, or having him as a guest on your show, don't hesitate to reach out. You can check out his incredible work at www.testosteronepodcast.com. Get ready to show and create the loving, supportive family you've always dreamed of. Let's dive in together. Welcome to the show, brother.
Man, I appreciate you having me on. And, not to pull the curtain back too far, but the live intro is pretty amazing. I'm impressed.
Yeah, we always strive to really give honor to our guests. You guys are what makes it special. So I just want to give back to you guys as much as possible.
Yeah, I get that. I just have to do it, when nobody's looking right at me, after the show, do it, behind the scenes, post-production. But I can appreciate the value of minimal post-production work, right? Like now it's done. You don't have to do it again.
Yeah, exactly. I've always been a big fan of, done is better than perfect. So
yeah,
for sure. Well, let's dive in, man. I just kind of want to ask you a question about you being a father, right? And what are some of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome as a father?
So I think that it's kind of adapted over the years, right? Like initially the biggest problem that I had was what most dads have, and it's just I don't know how to relate to a baby, right? Mm-hmm. There's not that nurturing, the natural nurturing vibe that I would get. It's a blob baby that, that she didn't do a whole lot. And so I had a problem, I guess, figuring out where I fit in with that. Mm-hmm. That was something that was almost superseded by just a general fatigue. Mental fatigue, physical fatigue. I didn't have the energy to put into figuring out how I was supposed to fit in with a baby. Mm-hmm. And then fast forwarding to now having a blended family, it makes my earlier problems seem like elementary school. It can be super, super difficult to figure out how to relate to each one of your children. I went from having one child to having 4 children, and how to relate to them. I've got 3 girls and a boy. Every one of them is different. You have to approach them differently, and figuring out how to build those relationships has probably been the biggest challenge.
Mm-hmm. What are some practical tips for that you can share with our audience?
Blending a family specifically is something that takes time. It's not something that you can put a timeline on. So patience, not just with the timeline, but with each individual kid. Like I said, they're all different. So it is my job as a father to not only cultivate those relationships, pursue those relationships, but figure out what that looks like. My wife and I were both raised by dads who did not do that. I have a relationship with my dad now. She does not have a relationship with her dad. And a lot of that is because they did not pursue those relationships. Even my dad, it's a little rocky. So I am really big on I'm a grown up. I'm the emotional, intelligent one. My 8-year-old is not as emotionally intelligent as I am. It is my job to make sure that we have the best relationship that we can have.
I like that you said that you're the grown up, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we forget that, you know what I mean? We get offended when a child, for instance, questions us, right? And we take that offensive. And at those moments, like you said, we have to take a step back and realize, hey, I'm the one with the emotional intelligence.
Yep, exactly. And it's easy to get offended, right? And and I still do it. Just recently, I've had a rough path with one of my 4, rougher than the other 3, and it was the one that in the beginning was the craziest about me. So what I have realized recently is I had this aha moment when any of my kids were responding to me or the world in some sort of negative way, I would respond back at them in the same way. So I was sinking to their level, so to speak. And what that looked like with this one kid in particular was me kind of crossing my arms and the silent treatment and the huffing and puffing and that kind of thing. She's emotionally immature, and I was just sinking right down there. So realizing things like that and not taking it personally. She's not mad at me necessarily. She's mad at the world. So let's come beside her and try to walk alongside, and show her how to navigate those things.
It's crazy too, because if you don't have that awareness, you obviously are going to get upset and offended, right? One of the things I tell my fathers that I talk to is that a strong-willed child is going to take more work.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why those strong-willed childs backtalk or don't follow the rules is because they are natural leaders, and we need to see them as that. They're not going to follow the norm. They are natural leaders. Yeah. Once we understand that, we don't take offense to that. We see that they're going to require more training, right? Because that's what discipline is. It's training. We're going to start pouring into them. We're going to start seeing where they need it. One kid might only take one discipline for the day, and he's okay, versus my strong-willed child, which might have 10 to 1. 10 disciplines to 1 out of boy, you know what I mean? And we just got to understand that and know that, hey, man, foolishness is stored up in the heart of a child.
Well, what's the alternative? You squash them down. I mean, is it possible to squash that leadership out of them if you handle it inappropriately?
Yeah, exactly. Exasperating our children. And that's exactly what we do. And we usually don't see that until they get into their teenage years. That's the fruit of it.
Yeah. How do you think that manifests itself as a teenager?
I've seen it within cutting themselves, self-loathing, not being able to fit in. Some teenagers I've seen where they actually don't want to leave the room at all. They want to isolate, So it manifests itself in different ways. I think it's one of the big contributors to negative groups such as gangs and stuff like that. You know what I mean? They're trying to find themselves in a sense because we just squashed that out of them. Right. So It's unfortunate, a lot of parents think they're doing the right thing, but in the end, they're actually not doing the right thing, having understanding, right. And learning about these things because we were never taught that.
Yeah.
So
I certainly wasn't.
So how has becoming a father changed your perspective of life and your personal growth?
So for personal growth, I think it gives you a whole different dimension of reason to grow. You can, for at least for myself, I'm only so hungry when it's just me, and having a family on board, not just financially, in fact, not even really financially, just like what we're talking about. I don't want to raise a gang member. I don't want to raise someone that's going to cut themselves because of something I did. So it puts me in a position to where I have to seek resources and I have to do that personal growth, or those are the consequences. So, doing things like this, doing the blended family podcast that I do, diving into research, those are the types of things that I am interested in. And luckily my wife enjoys it too. Like it's a hobby of ours, so to speak, or a lifestyle. We want to raise our children as best we can. And I think that started when we became, or before we became, a blended family, but that's what prompted it, the bigger family and the motivation to actually give a shit about mental health.
Mm-hmm. How important is it to have a partner that actually supports and is on the same path as you?
Oh man, it's absolutely necessary. You can fight some of these battles on your own. And in fact, I believe that it would be my obligation to do so if my wife was not supportive of it. But it makes it so much easier that, being on the same page. There are questions that you need to ask before you decide to take on a spouse, to make sure that, in my opinion, to make sure that those things are going to match up.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Now, talking about blended families, because I have a lot of people, I really don't have that much experience with blended families other than what I saw with my brother. And, I have a lot of men who come to me and ask me about that dynamic, because I understand it's very tricky in the way you navigate it. Right. What would your advice be for a father who's struggling to establish a strong connection with their children?
So I personally, in my experience, it's harder. The blended family aspect is harder. There are always surprises. There are always things that you don't expect. I think the number one thing that has helped in my family is intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that it is my job to do it. I have an almost 9-year-old, an almost 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 17-year-old. None of them are as wise as me. None of them are as emotionally mature as I am. They just don't, they're kids. They don't have it. I have to take that on. I have to try to relate to them. I've got my youngest, she's my biological kid. She's a talker. I don't like to listen all that much, but I have to be intentional, and I have to sit down on the floor and listen to her stories and engage her in that way. My oldest is an artist. I don't vibe on art either, but I'm going to have to sit down and draw with her occasionally. And those are the things that you have to do as a father. And meeting them where they are has made like huge improvements in our relationships.
Mm-hmm. No, I definitely agree with you. Dying to ourselves, because I'm like you. There's certain things my attention span, I'll be focused on that, and then all of a sudden it's like squirrel, what I mean? I'm looking the other way, and
Yeah.
you definitely have to be intentional with your children, especially doing the stuff that you don't want to do necessarily. But hey, guess what? It's important to them.
Yeah. The other really big pieces that we've implemented is, kids tend to, they want to do, right. They want to do the vacation. They want to go to the place. They want to go to the restaurant. They want to have the food, but then they also tend to be disappointed a lot of times because of this. It's a letdown. It's not exactly what they thought. If you, Christmas morning, I guess, from an adult perspective, let's pretend like we didn't have kids. And in that case, and if you take out the religious aspects of it, it's just another day. And people build it up like it's something super special, but it can be a letdown. So expectation management for me has been huge, because I would pour resources and time and money into some of these things, and then they would be let down, or they would be bored, or they would want to be done within 15 or 20 minutes. So I have to realize that, again, they're just kids, and manage what my expectations are going to be of their response to something that I have given them.
No, I like that. Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I've seen that even in my own walk. Because you want to, obviously you have this grand idea or this vision, right, of how certain things should go. And
Yep.
then your kids are just like, oh, whatever, dad. And then what, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden you get offended,
Yeah.
right? That's a part of self-regulation and controlling your own emotions, that my wife constantly just is always letting me know, hey, control yourself, with a little elbow nudge or whatever. But yeah, no, I've seen that too, where I'm offended now because they're not enjoying it. I spent a lot of money. I spent a lot of time to do it. And it's like, I got to remember in those moments, my presence is the present, just being engaged with them.
Right.
It doesn't matter if I'm taking them to the Irvine Spectrum or whatever for holiday nights, or even just going back home to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and going and seeing the real pretty lights that they have throughout downtown and stuff like that. You know what I mean? As long as I'm there with my family and I'm engaged with them at that moment is what matters to them.
Yeah, absolutely. They may not care about Santa Fe at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny too, because my oldest daughter, that's her love language. She loves quality time, right? And that goes back to understanding what your child's love language is.
Yeah.
Hers is quality time. So if it's getting wings from, one of the wing places out here and sitting around the table and just talking and communicating, or going out to dinner, or going out to wherever we go, right? She just cares about that. That's it. That's what fills her love tank, right?
Yeah.
And it's important to know that with each and every child, because each and every one of them are unique and different from the other one. So,
yeah. We've got one that is affection, and I can see it. My wife is not a physical touch person, so I can see it. She does it. My wife allows the physical touch, right? But I can see it zapping her energy and filling the other. It empties one tank and it fills the other. So then I have to make sure that I'm going behind and regulating whose tank is full. My wife's is getting low now, so let's pour into hers so that she can pour into theirs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We got multiple facets that we're controlling there. And I got to pour into this one. I got to pour into, and then also you got to be self-aware too, because you're pouring out who's putting in you.
Yeah.
So what do you do to make sure you're getting poured into?
So my love language is physical touch, and
Okay.
my wife, somehow it drains her tank a little bit differently whenever it's a kid. She does dig on the physical touch with me, but ultimately I find that what fills my tank the most is God. And for me, that looks like grabbing my guitar and just like, hey, I need you guys to empty the house for an hour or two, and I'm just gonna like play and sing poorly, just worship and cry and do my thing, and that fills me up enough to sustain that week of pouring into the kids' love language tanks.
And it's good to see that they get to watch you being vulnerable as well.
Yeah. And I don't do it in front of them, but they know what's going on. It's a, hey, y'all get out of my face because I'm going to get ugly here.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that's very needed. I see. They know, my kids know when I come to my room, because I have a tendency of isolation, right? Yeah. When I know I'm done, my tank is empty, I go to my room, I get into my Bible, right? I start praying to God just like you, and letting the waterworks start flowing, you know what I mean, and stuff like that, because there's something special about that time. Some people meditate, whatever. To me, that is my meditation, and just being alone in the presence of God. Doesn't matter how tough you think you are, when you're in his presence, it's crazy, because you are humbled in that moment.
Well, that's how you know it's working.
Yeah.
The harder I'm crying, the better I'm going to feel for the next 7 days.
Yes, yeah. And you sleep so good too.
Yeah.
We understand, and we've talked about this on our previous podcast, about how a father has the ability to change the environment. How do you affect or create a harmonious blended family environment being there?
So, and I have to say that it's not just just a good thing, right? So I have the ability to change that environment for the better and for the worse.
Yes.
And so and I'll admit it, whenever I change it for the worse, it's usually kind of like you're talking about, not to fill, but it's an isolation. I have a tendency to be able to make people feel like they don't even exist without looking at them, without saying anything, because I can just ignore you without ignoring you, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I think it's important that everyone be able to recognize the things that they do that cause those harms, right? And I can feel how harmful it is to my family when I get into that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And so the flip side of that is that I just make sure that I stay engaged. When I can feel myself withdrawing, that may be whenever it's time to ask the wife if she's, willing to empty the house and let me do my worship crying thing.
Mm-hmm.
But just so that I can stay engaged, because whether it's good or bad, I can definitely affect the whole vibe of the house, from polar opposites, great to terrible. My oldest daughter can do the same thing. Her mood affects everyone in the house differently in a way that no other child does.
When we do that and we change that whole environment in our home, that just goes to show you the influence we have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as fathers, we need to realize that we carry that much power.
And my fear is that
families.
many of us don't realize it, and we just kind of skate through life not understanding the impact on that temperature that we have within the house. And then our kids get old enough to escape. They go and live their life. They probably do the same thing. The boys, at least, they don't know any better, right? So it's important to know your effect and be able to regulate that.
Well, think about the message that we're also sending them too. When you're not validating somebody, right?
Yeah.
Well, if they're not getting validated at home, where it should be a safe environment where they get their accolades and stuff like that, where do you think they're going to turn to? That goes back to children seeking outside sources that are negative, such as gangs, or even I had an ex-CIA operative on this show talk about how Al-Qaeda was picking kids like that.
Really?
To do their dirty work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, because they're so hungry for the validation. That's where you get girls that become strippers, or the drugs, or people. One of my fears is that I'm going to have a daughter that seeks their validation from boys. And that's not something I'm interested in.
No, for sure. One of the questions I always ask a lot of the fathers that we have this one episode that we call the Lyman Chronicles. And I get blue collar dads on here talking about, their experiences, what they do to be better fathers and stuff like that. And I always ask them, are you okay with your daughter growing up and marrying somebody like you?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah. So it's tough, right? Because in the sense that I always strive to be improving.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But I do just as many embarrassing or shameful things, or, I'm just as guilty as the next guy. So I think what I might do better than the average dad is I recognize it and I strive to improve it. And I strive to be humble and not just rule with an iron fist. And this is the way that it's going to be. And it's difficult, it's difficult to have some sort of meltdown with one of your kids and have to go back and right that wrong and tell them why dad was wrong, and cry with them and say, hey, listen, I'm a human just like you are, and these are things that I need to be doing better. That's a hard conversation to have, but it's 100% necessary for them to see you being vulnerable.
Yeah, for sure. And it's imperative too, because when you're able to humble yourself and go to them and show them that you are vulnerable, that you make mistakes, the message that it comes out of that is, man, it is so powerful. I had my daughter one time, and I don't know where she got this, but she came up with this notion that she needed to be perfect, right? And part of being a father is listening. And I heard that in her because she kept saying, I'm not perfect like you. I'm not perfect like you. And I was really listening to what she was saying. And in that moment, she was saying that she sees me as this perfect person who doesn't make no mistakes, who she is burning herself out because she can't live up to it, right?
Yeah.
So I had to stop her and correct her in that aspect and be like, look, I am so sorry that I haven't shown you any kind of vulnerability. And I had to start changing my ways. It was becoming very vulnerable and intentional, right, with my ways, like we're talking about. But I started telling her, look, I don't expect you to be perfect, honey, by no means. And I started having to show her, like, when I made mistakes, I would come to her and be like, man, I made a mistake. You were absolutely right. Even something as simple as freaking out and yelling at somebody at a stoplight, right?
Yeah.
Because their head's up their butt.
Yeah.
And her turning around and calling me out on it and be like, hey, Dad, you tell me not to yell at my brothers, but you're yelling at this guy. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And being humble
Yeah.
to be able to say, you're absolutely right, honey. I'm sorry for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that has tremendous, tremendous value. I cannot stress how important that is for our children to see that.
Yep, it does. One of those tough conversations that I had to have recently was that it was, like I mentioned earlier, meeting or matching their emotional state and kind of sinking to their level. So I had to go back to my almost 12-year-old daughter and say, you know, what I'm noticing is that you feel like I'm angry at you a lot more often than I'm angry with you. And what's happening is that this is how you're reacting to the world. It's kind of an arms crossed, pouty thing. And that's exactly what I do to you whenever you aggravate me. I arms cross, and I don't do that to anyone else. I just do it to her. So pointing that out, and she was like, yeah, I can see that. That makes sense. And I don't like it when you do it to me. So that's what I'm doing to my siblings or mom or whatever, or the world. So that one was tough because it wasn't just like hey, Dad's making a mistake here. Let's see what we can do to correct it. But it was like this deeply rooted emotional immaturity that was coming out of me on a consistent basis. And what it looked like is that I just didn't like this one particular kid as much as the others. That's what it felt like to her, that I had something against her, and it had nothing to do with her. It was just like I was mimicking her emotions. That one was rough, having to admit that and talk through that with a 12-year-old.
Oh, I bet. I had something similar like that with my daughter, to where because when it's your oldest, right, or whatever, you know, obviously they got the crash course of parenting.
Yeah.
Right? And she has actually voiced that to both her mother and I, where she's like, man, it's not fair. The boys get treated different. And in that moment, both my wife and I had to come in agreement and come to her and apologize for not giving her what she needed. Because we have a debt we owe our kids, whether we see it or not, right? We have to raise up children that mentally able to go out into this world and be a productive member of society, right? That is what we're tasked with.
Yeah.
And in that moment, she was feeling like it was unfair the way we raised her. So we had to see that, address it, apologize, right? And then show her a different way, because she still deals with that. I mean, she picks on her brother and stuff like that. And that was me being super harsh on her because she's my little girl, you know what I mean? And me coming from an environment, you know, what they say, that what walks in fathers runs in sons. That's the way I was raised.
Yeah.
So I started showing that to my daughter, who at the moment, she was the only child I had. And I raised her very harsh. So she does that too with her brothers. And it's like, no, we're trying to show them a different way, honey, because it affects them. Because now the middle child, right, starts picking on the younger child, and the younger child goes to school, and now he's being a bully. You know what I'm saying? So it's a snowball effect that we need to address. And it starts with us changing and then working all the way down through each child.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that, you know, my wife has always been terrified that she's going to raise a mean girl. And something that we do is, you know, it's easy to say, treat each other with kindness, right? But I try to value their opinions. And what we do in our house is not every decision, but a lot of decisions that have been discussed between me and my wife, and not necessarily decided upon, but decided that it's the two possible outcomes, either one of them will be okay. We let the kids weigh in on those, and they may seem like adult decisions. They may seem like decisions that kids, you know, it's measured and it's analyzed, and then we're not in any danger of, you know, hey, should we buy this $14 million house, or should we invest our money, that kind of thing. But that like cultivates this atmosphere in my house of everyone's opinion matters. And that way, whenever, they don't pick on each other as much because everyone has like an assigned value that they can feel. It's tangible.
No, I like that. Yeah, definitely. That's where you start seeing that validation,
Yeah.
throughout. Yep. No, I really like that. How big does our hormones and the hormones level, how big of an impact does that have on fathering?
For me, it was one of two things that mattered, period. The first one was God. I had a huge breakdown moment with God about 12, 13 years ago. And the other one is my hormone levels. My
Mm-hmm.
testosterone, when it was deficient, I didn't have the energy. I didn't have the focus, the mental ability. I didn't have the drive to want to be better emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
I was an anxious mess. So for me, it is one of the two most important things I could have ever done. Um, a lot of guys experience, like a lack of libido and that kind of thing. That wasn't ever my thing. It was all mental health with me and physical energy. So that was a huge difference for me. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't able to get down on the floor and play with my daughter after work. I had to go take a nap just because my T levels were so low. So it was impactful for sure.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who reached out to me, and he didn't even know that his test levels were low. He just had this, like you said, lack of libido for his wife,
Yeah.
even though she aggressively pursued him. He didn't want nothing to do with her, unfortunately. Um, what that led into was an affair.
Yeah.
Okay, started off as an emotional affair, and then it turned into a physical affair. And until he hit rock bottom with that, then he was, I guess pride. Because when I asked him, I was like, why didn't you go check to see what was going on with you physically? And it was pride. He didn't
Yeah.
want to admit that, hey, man, my test levels are low, or he didn't even want to go see, right? But unfortunately, when he hit rock bottom, he was able to go see and get tested. And they're like, man, they're like super low. No wonder you don't have no libido for anything, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or energy, or like you said, sex drive, energy, all that different stuff that it affects, right? So,
Yeah.
it was good that he went and checked that. It was unfortunate that he had to go through that, but it wasn't until he hit that he was
Yeah.
able to go get tested, is what I'm
So is
saying.
he on TRT now?
Yes, he is.
Probably a totally different guy, huh?
Totally different guy. He's changed his eating, because we understand that eating has a big, there's certain foods like soy processed foods and endocrine disrupting chemicals that you should avoid, like alcohol and stuff like that. So he's basically changed his whole lifestyle. He's got a trimmer and everything. So
Nice. Yeah, I was white collar, but I was just kind of middle of the pack, non-management.
mm-hmm.
Within 3 months of starting TRT, which was a hurdle to get on it. I was told when I said, hey, I've been doing some research on my own. I think I'd like you to test my testosterone levels. My doctor looked at me and said, look at that beard. There's no way your testosterone levels are low. We're not going to test them, which is total BS, by the way. I mean, it's not related.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, within 3 months, I had re-enrolled in college. I had gone back and become a student. Within a year, I was moving up into management. Within a couple of years of that, I was, had my own businesses, multiple. And I mean, it just, the ambition, having the podcast, I would never be able to speak. I was the guy that failed public speaking in high school. So to be able to come on shows like yours or to host my own show is not something that I would have been able to do without my normal testosterone levels.
No, for sure. What are some common misconceptions surrounding the issue other than the beard thing? Because I've heard that guys that have high test levels actually start going bald. Is that true? Okay.
Sometimes, yeah, the DHT can convert. If male pattern baldness is something that runs in your genes, then higher test levels are going to exacerbate or expedite that hair loss for sure. Misconceptions, I would say the biggest one is roid rage. We don't get more aggressive. In fact, I'm more humble. I'm more gentle. I'm kinder with my hormone levels balanced than I am with them skewed. If anything, it would be estrogen. If your estrogen is too high, that, from what I have seen, makes guys a little bit more aggressive. So the roid rage is not a thing at therapeutic levels. It's not easy. So it's not, steroid abuse, because it's something that's monitored. Whenever I do labs several times a year, I've been on it for 10 or 12 years, and I still do labs, 3 or 4 or 5 times a year. Um, I'm pulling full panels. I'm doing CBC and CMPs, and I'm checking thyroid, and I'm looking at everything I could possibly look at. And so it's not something that is just easy, where it's like, okay, I'm going to get some testosterone from the local guy at the gym and I'm going to inject it. I'm going to be on my way and everything's going to be great. It takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
In fact, it requires a lot of time, energy, and effort. So it's something that's worth it in most guys' cases, but it's not something that can just be handled generally by your primary care physician.
No, that's good to know, especially us, so we're here in Southern California where we're so close to Mexico,
Yeah.
you
Easy
know,
to get.
easy to get and stuff
Yeah.
like that. Are there any specific strategies or lifestyle changes that can help for individuals that cope with testosterone loss or its effects?
I have never seen someone go from deficient levels
Hmm.
to what I would call optimal levels without hormone replacement therapy.
Okay.
You can certainly raise it. You can raise your natural production, but you don't generally raise it even with diet, lifestyle changes. You're not, if you're low, you're low. If you're, 400 at 35 years old, you may be able to raise it to 5 or 550, but you can't get up into that 11, 1200 range that you need to be in without testosterone replacement therapy.
So definitely reducing like cortisol and stuff like that. I mean, they can help, but it's not going to get it to where its optimum level is, right?
Yeah, yeah, and generally it doesn't get it. Your testosterone fluctuates on a daily basis throughout the
Hmm.
day anyway. That's why a lot of insurance companies require you to test 2 or 3 times before they'll actually consider covering the treatment. So, if you go in there and you test at 400, the next day maybe you test at 470,
Hmm.
but certainly not at the, I would say, average minimum 800, 900 that you need to test at to actually feel better.
I like that you said that the beard thing, right? Because I always thought facial hair.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, one of the things I've been using is maca. I maca and what's the other one that I've been dealing with at night? Helps me sleep and reduce cortisol, ashwagandha.
Okay. Yeah.
We kind of took a holistic approach just because, my wife and her chronic illness,
Mhm.
Western medicine had failed her. So we decided to take a holistic approach and it's helped me.
Yeah.
I haven't felt like I've needed that, but it's just, being 45 years old, it kind of starts helping you, you know what I mean? Heal better and feel better and stuff like that, strength gains and stuff like that. So I've been dealing with that. But a lot of my younger friends, they have low T. I mean, I had one guy come to me and tell me, man, that his testosterone levels were that of an 80-year-old man,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. That's another common misconception, is the lab test that they use when they test your testosterone
Hmm.
ranges between, 300 and 900, sometimes 300 and 1100, somewhere in that range. That range includes 80-year-old men. So if you go in and you test at 301, they're going to tell
Yeah.
you that you're within the normal range. But at 45 or, at 35, that's not necessarily normal. The 301 may be normal or average for an 80-year-old, but not for a 35 or 40-year-old. But that's kind of what insurance is looking for. They
Hmm.
want, they want to make sure that you need it, but it's a business, right? So their end goal is to deny as many claims as they can to put that money back on their books. So if you're over 300, you're not getting covered by insurance.
No, that's good to know for sure. What are some important considerations for those considering this option of testosterone replacement?
I would say just be prepared for it to be real work. There's probably,
Okay.
I don't know, maybe 40% of the guys on TRT that I've come across
Hmm.
are just simple, here's your prescription, go with it, and then they don't get any kind of side effects. They don't need to adjust their dosing. They don't need any real hand holding. The other 60% of us are going to have to put in some real thought, some real work. And by work, I mean you're going to need to write down how you feel. You're going to need to write down what your dosing was. You're going to need to pay attention to your symptoms. And it's a process. And I call it getting dialed in. You can be on TRT, or you can be on TRT and really be dialed in. And it's worlds of difference if you're willing to put in the effort to make sure that you're communicating with your specialist. This is what I'm feeling. This was what my dose was. I'm this hungry. This is how many calories I'm eating, that kind of thing.
No, that's important to know for sure. Now, I told you a story about a good friend of mine, right? About, what happened to him. How can couples navigate the challenges that arise from hormonal imbalances and also maintain a healthy and fulfilling relationship? What have you seen?
Yeah, so it tends to be really difficult, and what can happen is, maybe both of their libidos are down. I see that quite a bit. Or the females, the male's libido is down because of testosterone deficiency. The female's is down because the male is not leading the household the way that he should. She's not as attractive she's not as attracted to him as she once was, because his alpha status has fallen. He's not the leader that he once was. So there's a couple of different scenarios. I see females leading the charge. Hey, something's wrong with my husband. We're going to join your community and we're going to figure it out for them, with them. And I see guys that are able to lead that charge for themselves. But then a year later, they're like, hey, my wife's libido, mine is sky high. Hers is way down in the dumps. And ultimately the woman usually ends up getting on some sort of hormone replacement themselves. But I think, what I would say to a woman, what I would hope for a wife to do is, if something changes with your man, be patient, ask questions, give him a safe place that he can be vulnerable with you about those things. And if his libido's down, there's a reason. Maybe it's an emotional thing or a mental thing. Maybe it's some stress at work, that kind of thing. But if it's an extended period of time, check the hormones, see what's going on there.
No, I like that you said create that safe space. I mean, because our whole world revolves around that, right? It's our ego, right? And whenever that's attacked, obviously there's going to be certain emotions that are attached to that. So just create a safe space. I like that you said that.
No man wants to go to any person, but especially their wife, and say, hey, I don't feel right. Something's wrong with me. I don't feel like I'm leading this family. I don't feel like I'm leading you. I'm not the same man that I used to be. Guys don't want to say those things. So you might have to coax it out of them.
I like that you talked about the woman leading the charge. Now, I've seen also, and I've also seen, I've read where there has been certain issues that have derived from men stepping back and leading their families, to where women now have to step into those roles and carry this weight that they were never meant to carry, right? To lead the family. That's led for them having higher testosterone levels as well, PCOS, which is another type of hormonal imbalance, where the women actually start growing facial hair. A little bit. And it's also led to a lot of miscarriages.
Yeah.
So
stress on the mind and body that they weren't intended to be carrying.
So I always like to let husbands know, because especially within the line industry that I'm accustomed to, that I work in, when you're gone a long time and you're putting all this weight on your wife to take care of the home front, you're going to burn her out.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're going to start seeing it in her stress levels and everything else. And it's a spiral effect. You definitely don't want to get behind the power curve on that one.
Yeah.
You want to address it.
There's an entire movement these days where, the women are wanting equality in the household, and that kind of thing. And it probably started decades ago with women wanting to enter the workforce and that kind of thing, which, by the way, I got no problem with anything like that. I would say that in my household, it leans more towards traditional, but I was talking to my wife the other day, and she told me that she thinks that I handle over half of the domestic responsibilities, the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry, that kind of thing. And she's a stay-at-home mom. So if we lean towards traditional, it's not like I'm throwing my hands up and saying, dishes are your thing, I'm not touching them. No, I do those things because one reason is because her love language is acts of service. So if she sees a task as hers, and it's especially easy if I don't see it that way. I don't see dishes as her task, but I know that if I do dishes, it's going to get her feeling certain kind of ways about me. So it's easy for me to want to chip in around the house because I get quick responses for it. Anyway, that's not my point. My point is that there's this movement where women want equality in the household, and they want to share in their masculine, and they want the male to share in the female's feminine, and just kind of cross lines and go back and forth. And I personally think it's pretty dangerous, the way that they're living their lives, and it's putting the men in their feminine sides and putting the women in their masculine sides, doing exactly what you're talking about, causing other hormone deficiencies and ultimately even issues with conceiving and carrying babies.
It's crazy, because it's a movement, but it's like, man, it's like, isn't that what we're seeing in the world today? Like more prevalent, where boys think they're girls and girls think they're boys, and the confusion that we're causing and the chaos that is being caused by that.
I can't even wrap my brain around what's going on with high school age children these days. I mean, it's nuts. I don't get it.
I had a conversation the other day with a kid, and he was talking about how, transgenders and stuff like that. And I told him it was a mental illness, and he got kind of offended with me. And I said, okay, so let's look at it from a father's standpoint. Okay, say I have a daughter, she's bulimic. No matter what I tell her, she sees herself as fat. Okay, she's always looking in the mirror. She sees herself heavy, even though she's totally emasculated. Her body weight is super below to where it's dangerous.
Yeah.
But she continues to see herself in that aspect. I was like, what is that? And he's like, well, that's a mental illness. Okay. I was like, so if you agree that that's a mental illness, then a little boy or a little girl who sees themselves as a woman and then goes and gets a surgery which emasculates their body, and gets a surgery where it takes off their certain private parts. I was like, is that not considered a mental illness too? Isn't that body dysmorphia? Nah, he's just like, well, I never thought of it that way. I was like, well, there you go, man.
Yeah, it's a result of this you do you mindset that we adopt, that this whatever makes you happy, go with the flow kind of mentality that humans tend to have these days.
I like there's a saying, and I don't even know who the guy who said it, but it says that if you stand for nothing, you're going to fall for anything.
Yeah.
I think as leaders of our home, as fathers, we need to stand up, right, and draw the line in the sand and be like, hey, enough is enough. I had a past guest on here talk about how for so long we have taken a back seat as fathers because we're always working. We're always, chasing after the big job, doing this, doing that. We're sending our women to go out and fight.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. He's like, oh, what do? We come home, we work a 24 and 8, which is 24 hours and 8 off. We sit on the couch. We're tired. We just worked. There's a PTA meeting. So what do? We send our wives to that battle.
Yeah.
Okay. He's like, now they go there and they're talking about transgenderism and pushing agendas on our children that I wouldn't agree with if I was there. But guess what? I'm not there because why? Our wives are there. So now we're not even, we're sending them to a fight that we should be there for. He's like, and I'm not saying to get all aggressive and stuff like that. He's like, but imagine if a bunch of masculine men showed up and they're trying to push these agendas down our throat. Do you honestly think it's going to have the same effect as a 90-pound female who's there by herself?
Right.
Versus a 6'5", 270-pound journeyman lineman there with his buddies saying, hey man, you're not going to teach my kids about this stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Taking that book out of our library, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he's absolutely right. We need to stand up and we need to start fighting the battles that we were meant to fight,
It's exhausting, and I do it. I'm at the school stuff. I don't send my wife to much of anything by herself. We do most things together. And that's how I've been able to kind of skirt the line between my professional career, my family, the time spent, that kind of thing. If I've got a business trip in Florida, they're coming with me, and that affords us the time and the ability. They work for me. That gives us the ability for dad to be at the sporting events and at the meetings and the orientations and open houses And it's exhausting mentally, but you have to do it. You have to, even if we removed the agenda pushing that you're talking about, you got to be in those kids' lives, every piece of it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't not show up. That's important to me. Doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, parent teacher night, all that matters.
No, that's good to see, man. And for you guys who are listening, you need to do the same thing. You know, our podcast is called the Show Up Dad for a reason, because they need you to show up.
Yeah. Yeah. Even to me, even if, and this is going to get personal and probably piss some people off, but if you have to work that 24/8, maybe consider reevaluating your habits, your lifestyle to where, dad can work more of a normal job and support his family. Maybe you don't have the RV that you go camping in, make some sacrifices like that, because the sacrifice you should not be making is the parent teacher night, the meet the teacher, the open houses. You got to be there for those.
Yeah, definitely. I think for so long we have sacrificed our children on the altar of success.
Yep.
But we're getting down to it now, Brandon. I wanted to ask you some questions here. What do you think about bioidentical versus traditional test replacement? Is there any pros and cons that you've seen, or?
Honestly, I think that's more of a marketing thing.
Okay.
It's not something that matters much. If there is any sort of difference, I think that a lot of doctors use that as a marketing ploy.
Okay. Okay.
Now, the administration method matters. If you have a doctor that's pushing pellets, those are generally bad news for guys.
Really?
Yeah, the alcohol-based topicals, those are absolute trash. There's some compounded creams that work okay, but if you put it on, your wife's going to get it on her, your children are going to get it on them in smaller doses. But if you don't want your wife getting any if she doesn't need it. You don't want your toddler getting any, period. So the injections are generally the easiest and most efficient way to deliver it. But as
Mhm.
far as bioidentical or synthetic, doesn't matter.
So what makes the pellets not
A couple of things. One, it's more expensive. You
okay?
get charged for a procedure whenever you do it. Two, it's painful. Even after they heal, a lot of guys complain it feels like they're always sitting on their wallet, like you can
Mhm.
always feel something in there. But the biggest reason for me is that they don't typically. So, I mentioned earlier that it's difficult to really dial yourself in there and get your T levels exactly where they need to be in relation to all of your other hormones. And when you're just sticking grains of rice in your butt cheek and hoping for the best for 6 months at a time, there's no dialing that can be done. They're in there, you're getting what you're getting. They will tell you that they should last 6 months, but a lot of times they don't. They maybe last 60 days, and then you feel great for 2 months, and then you're just slowly declining for the next 4 months before they're able to take them out and put new ones in.
Okay. No, that definitely clears up some questions I might have. I have a lot of friends who take the pellets,
Yeah.
so hopefully they hear this. You know what I mean?
They're super convenient, right? They sound convenient because it's just a quick thing and then you're good for 6 months.
mm, mm. What are some key takeaways or lessons that you hope listeners will gain from your experience as a father, husband, and advocate for testosterone health, Brandon, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So as a father, I would say that it's super important to be patient and kind with your kids, to show up for your kids. That's the best, couple of things that you can do.
Mhm.
Uh, as a representative of testosterone, I would say that if you feel something's off, check your levels. You don't have to involve your doctor. You can walk into a Quest Diagnostics or a LabCorp. You can get tests done without your doctor, visiting your doctor. You can visit discountedlabs.com. You can literally purchase a lab requisite right there. Test your own levels. See where you're at. If a doctor tells you that your 300, your 400, your 500 is normal and there's nothing they can do, and you're not 85 years old, question that. Seek another opinion. There are tons of resources at testosteronepodcast.com that I would encourage you to look into, and including finding a doctor. If you can't find one that's going to treat you well, or if you've been trying to get dialed in with somebody local and they just can't do it, reach out. I can definitely set you up with somebody.
Right on. Thank you once again. And how can they reach out to you, Brandon?
I think the easiest way would be to text TRT to 66866. That just kind of all my links will be available in that way.
And we'll also have that on the show notes as well, brother. Once again, thank you for coming on here and sharing your experience in the realm of blended families, all things testosterone, and just shooting and talking with me, man. Just it's awesome to talk to other fathers. So thank you.
Yeah. Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, brother. We'll be talking to you soon.